Welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations, a series of short and shareable conversation starters for those of us who have or love and support people with a complicated and beautiful brain. Here's your host, Angela Geddes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Kitchen Table Conversations. Well, actually, let me correct myself. Welcome to the 100th episode of Kitchen Table Conversations. I just can't believe we're here. 100 episodes in, and the conversations, the learning, and the impact, I think, and from the feedback that I'm getting, just keeps growing, and I'm pretty excited about that. If you've been with me from the beginning, or you're just tuning in for the first time, thanks so much for being a part of this journey. Just reflecting back, it's important to note that we launched our first episode a couple of years ago on September the 9th, which is International FASD Day. And we had a clear purpose in mind, and that was to bring critical discussions around complicated mental health, complicated learning, and complicated developmental conditions or delays or concerns, and critical discussions around prenatal alcohol and other substance exposures, and the link to some of those conditions. So we wanted to bring these discussions to more people, more homes, and more professionals in the field. And my mission continues, it's always been, and it continues to be twofold. Number one is to reduce the incidences of prenatal exposure, prenatal alcohol and substance exposure through better awareness and prevention efforts, or maybe let's just say different approaches to prevention and awareness. And number two is to reduce the impact of these exposures by ensuring that more people, more individuals and families get the right support, the earlier interventions, and that we are better able to screen and assess within our scope of practice to ensure that there are fewer wrong doors for people who are seeking help. As we reflect on 100 episodes, I want to talk about some of the more powerful takeaways and the impact that we've seen and how this work continues. So we'll start with, the focus on uncovering these hidden conditions. And I remember doing a presentation with Dr. Peter Choate, and he spoke to me. I was explaining to him what my goal was around my part of the presentation, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, so you want to uncover the hidden ones, right? You want to bring more attention to the people who do not have an FASD diagnosis, but are struggling and really feeling misunderstood and further stigmatized." So one of the most rewarding aspects of this podcast has been the ability to bring my practice-based research into the public eye and see it validated by some empirical studies, which I will include on my website, so you can check some of those out. I've spent years advocating for deeper understanding of neurodevelopmental conditions that have often gone unrecognized, misunderstood, conditions that impact learning, their school experiences, their family experiences, their mental health, their behavior, and daily functioning. And one of the biggest gaps I continue to see is that many individuals who struggle daily with puzzling symptoms, such as ADHD-like traits, or social difficulties, or executive functioning challenges, and emotional dysregulation, are still not getting the right diagnoses and the right supports. Far too often, people are misunderstood, labeled incorrectly, or told that their struggles are due to something else without anyone asking for deeper questions, or asking the deeper questions, and sometimes the challenging questions around prenatal health. And this is why I've dedicated my later part of my career to ensuring that fewer people face the wrong door. So when they go someplace, people will understand that they do have a neurodivergent condition and they're not just treatment resistant or resistant to the kind of supports and services that they may benefit from. So working hard to make sure that people get access to the right assessments and that families are equipped with the tools that they need. And sometimes those assessments are more functional assessments with informed clinicians so that we can make recommendations that change people's trajectory immediately as we work towards more standardized testing and formal clinical diagnoses. And the research is backing this up. Dr. William Curran has developed a protocol for screening and assessment for social workers, and he's got a ton of research indicating the integral role that social workers play and how we can enhance that by system policy changes and by clinician training and more awareness. Soon to be, Dr. Narosha Bowden from Australia is also doing similar work, acknowledging the integral role that social workers play. I've been doing the same thing, which is why I've created training that is specific for social workers and those of us who are in allied health professions who do some sort of assessment and see people on the daily. So we can do better when we know better. So again, the research is backing this up. The more we study prenatal alcohol and substance exposures, the more we realize just how prevalent and unrecognized or under-recognized these conditions are. And what was once dismissed as rare and only affecting a very small group is now being acknowledged to, be a widespread issue that is shaping generations. And there is intergenerational implications because if people have unrecognized FASD, some of those traits and some of those symptoms can be passed on through our DNA, for one. And also, it makes the parenting journey trickier or a little bit harder than what it would or could be had we, better understood the complexities and supported the family as a whole and as a unit. This is a whole family condition that needs to be supported holistically. So again, pleased to be doing this work. It's very, very meaningful, and as long as I'm able, I will continue. And I'll continue with this podcast too, even though I have to be honest with you, it's not my favorite thing to do. But every time I think about not doing it, somebody gives me a really, really positive comment or remark, and how the podcast itself has influenced their practice or their perspective on something. And so then, it kind of validates and it makes you more motivated to keep going. And so far, too, just seeing the impact of this podcast, recognizing that some of the conversations that really matter. And one of the most personally rewarding episodes I've done was focusing on anxiety and not FASD at all. And I know that resonated with many of you. Anxiety is often seen as a burden, something that holds people back. But in this episode, I wanted to shift the narrative. Oh, pardon me, there's my dog experiencing a little bit of anxiety because somebody's here. I wanted to shift the narrative and highlight the positive traits that often go hand in hand with anxious people. So, for starters, anxious people care very deeply. Anxious people really want to do their best, and they pay attention to detail and really doing it right. Anxious people notice those kinds of details and really think things through. In fact, anxiety is often associated with overthinking, but overthinking allows us that time to really plan and to really consider the options and the consequences and that kind of thing. And anxious people can be really counted on to get things done. So this message struck a chord with so many listeners, and I received a number of personal messages from people who felt seen, validated, affirmed, and even empowered for the first time. So that episode reinforced something that I've known all along. How we frame our challenges can make all of the difference. And this isn't just about anxiety. It's all about, it's about all the misunderstood and overlooked conditions that so many people struggle with. It's about changing how we see behavior, maybe look at them like symptoms rather than behaviors, and how we approach mental health and how we support individuals who process the world slightly differently. So, the other point of this work that I do and this podcast that I do helps to, advance the work, advance the education, increase the awareness, and provide some opportunities for calls to action. So while 100 episodes is a big milestone, I know the work is far from being done, but I do really see hope. I see that we can change the landscape and imagine what people will be looking at, a decade from now, when the incidences of intense mental health services or symptoms are reduced. I know, as I said, the work is far from done. We need to keep pushing for better education, better assessments, better support systems, and more access to relevant services. And I continue to work to ensure that this conversation reaches post-secondary institutions. My book is now a required read in many, and I'm really, really pleased about that. My training that I offer is different than typical because it's filled with examples of living experience and my experience supporting so many families. I often wish I would have kept track of how many families I've supported over the years, but it's a lot. And that's where my most meaningful learning takes place, is from the people who live and breathe and walk and talk these experiences every day. Committed to making sure that future helpers or professionals in the helping professions are better trained to recognize neurodevelopmental conditions and provide appropriate supports and services. And I've had the privilege with working, as I said, with a number of families, educators, and clinicians to help people understand how early exposures can impact the brain and the body, and how we can shift our approaches to be more effective, because that's what we all want as helpers. We want to make sure that what we're doing is helping. And I've seen firsthand how lives can change when people finally get answers, get the right supports, and get the right, ultimately, diagnosis. But the right screening and assessment so that the recommendations and the supports can be relevant and helpful. I've seen it. It works. And I will continue to push forward because too many people are still slipping through the cracks. So in this 100th episode, I will offer my gratitude with a big thank you to all of you for being a part of this journey with me. And then, as always, there's a call to action. My ask is simply keep the conversations going. Bring them back to your kitchen table. If this podcast has inspired you, challenged you, or even given you something to think about it, share it, talk about it, bring it back to your own circles, bring it back to your kitchen tables, because the more we talk with the people who are really important to us, because that's where we learn. And the more we learn, the better that we can do. We all have the power to change some lives. It's up to all of us to support healthy pregnancies and healthy people, healthy families, healthy communities, and to ensure that fewer people face the wrong doors. And we can all be a part of building a future where prenatal exposures are reduced, hidden conditions are uncovered, and no one is left to struggle in silence. Think about our mental health systems right now. Think about our school systems that are underfunded and the needs are in excess of what people are able to offer. Think about our people and families experiencing homelessness right now. Think about mental health and addiction services, and think about our child protection services and our justice systems, that all of which are overrepresented by people who have undiagnosed brain-based conditions linked directly to prenatal exposures. So let's keep the conversation going. With many thanks, Angela.